Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Monday, February 7 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. Welcome. We'll start with the roll call. David Ballard.
Present.
Zachary Shoemaker. Here. Ron Lancaster.
Present.
Tom LeClaire.
Present.
Tom's here. Walter Steed is here. Tracy Hopkins.
Mr. Hopkins, let me know he will not be available today.
Thank you, ma'am. Joseph Leckie. Here. Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Jared Smith.
Here.
Justin Price. Sean Martin. Carl Miller. R.D. Huntley. Alyssa Taysom.
Here.
Chair, Mr. Martin is on Zoom.
Okay, so we have him as well. So we're missing Tracy Hopkins and Justin Price, I believe. Okay, thank you all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I am not aware of any changes to staff. Staff has none. Do any commission members have anything? Hearing none, I'd accept a motion to adopt the agenda. Mr. Ballard, a motion, a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lewis, I think.
Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. Carl Miller is a new ex officio member to us from Compass. I hadn't warned you, maybe Miranda did, but if you'd like to come to the podium and give us a short bow so we'll know who you are, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. Carl Miller with Compass. We're the regional planning agency, metropolitan planning organization for Ada and Canyon County, and been at Compass for about 15 years now and live and work in the city. So excited to be representing Compass on this commission.
Okay, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your attendance and help. Old business. Ms. Carson is going to give us a transportation projects update, and if I'm not mistaken, there were a fair number of things that have transpired since last month.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are quite a few bolded items. I'll just start on page 3. The Integrated 5-Year Work Plan was adopted by the ACHD Commission with a slight adjustment. I haven't seen the new final draft published. So if you look at the 2022-26 draft, the Meridian city portion was not amended. When the final is posted, I will let you all know. The lender project, the scope of work and interagency agreements, we continue to work on those with ACHD and Keller. ACHD is working directly with Keller, but we are working with ACHD on those. Moving on to page 4, the next highlight I want to make is the Macmillan Black Cat intersection. I believe this was one that was initially requested to be added to the list, and it was added as an interim intersection project. At this point, ACHD has decided that they will do a permanent intersection project rather than an interim, and so it's now programmed for design this year with construction in 24. I'm not going to go over U-Stick 10 Mile to Linder much because Mr. Hood is here to discuss that project with you. There is a Chinden West update in your staff communications as well as the one here in the project update. They do expect the Locust Grove Meridian construction to start this spring of 2022. And that is all. Oh, the last thing I wanted to highlight is the transportation action plan with Ada County is going up in front of their Board of Commissioners on February 9th for the final adoption. So if that's adopted, I'll let you know next month and send out that final.
2 days, the 9th?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so I can stand for any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard.
Ms. Carson, I see as you're going Eagle Road South, the first entrance onto the freeway there. There's hotels on there. I see that there's temporary lights that have been put on poles as opposed to the metal frames. I'm not aware of any projects going on there, so I was curious as to what may be going on at that intersection.
I'm not sure exactly which intersection, I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but I would say if you wouldn't up-to-date information, it looks like Sean Martin just turned on his camera, so he might have an answer for us. But that would be one of those questions that you could turn to roadwork in the area. And that project is likely on there, but I'm gonna let Mr. Martin answer because it looks like he's prepared.
Mr. Martin, can you elaborate?
Hi, yes, if I believe I understand what the commissioner is asking, we had during, I think it was January, one of the very first snowfalls, we had a car crash into one of the signal poles at the Eagle off-ramp. And we had to take the pole down and put up a wooden pole in its place. It's just a temporary pole until we can get a permanent design and a permit from ITD to go back in and put the pole in.
No, I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if that was part of the project to widen that part of Eagle, but I appreciate the update. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else with questions about the project's update? Okay, moving along, the next item is a new business action item. Brian McClure is going to give us a report on the Fields sub-area plan. Looking forward to this. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Miranda. Good afternoon, Commission. I'm here to provide you a brief update on the Fields sub-area plan. This was adopted by City Council on December 21st of 2021, last year, just a few months ago. This was after a recommendation for approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission. This project was a direct continuation of work from the 2019 comprehensive plan and was a high priority for council. As part of this plan, it was not a land use plan, so there were no future land use map revisions or changes. Further, and just because we've had questions from others, there were no annexations or other development associated with the plan. Lastly, there were multiple opportunities for public engagement specific to the neighbors within area, the whole area, and then also for the entire city. This is some regional context here. It is the 4 square miles in Northwest Meridian. State Highway 2026 is on the top. Star is to the city of Star is to the north. Nampa is to the west and south. And then you see State Highway 16 and the candy stripe colored on the east. Also of note, Star Road in the middle has a river crossing over the Boise River. Quickly, here's some context for the plan. There's a lot of development pressures in the area, but there's also utility and service challenges, including water, sewer, fire, police, and parks. And we also have a great deal of roadways with no improvements planned. Also of note, the Williams pipeline runs through this area. It's the same pipeline that runs through South Meridian, northwest to southeast of the city. Related, right next to the Williams pipeline is a very large 7 million gallon liquefied natural gas tank that's very dense and very cold. The plan is fairly basic, serving to overlay many of the existing codes and policies we have, but through a context-sensitive lens for the area. The purpose of the plan is to ensure that the Fields area implements the vision of the comprehensive plan, is vibrant, self-sufficient, and distinctly Meridian. All the unique location-specific challenges and circumstances are opportunities when consistently channeled and furthered within the context of this plan. Plan framework looked at transportation, parks and pathways, economic elements, character, and had a special focus on the Star Macmillan Center in the middle. This is a concept graphic of the Star and Macmillan Center. It considered the area, it was a core element of the area, and a lot of research went into it. The map here is a very small portion of the overall plan. Star is on the west, Owyhee Storm Boulevard on the east, and Macmillan on the north. The idea behind this is that it's central to the area. It's accessible but insulated from the highways and larger corridors, and it's distinctly Meridian, not Star or Nampa. It's intended to be iconic and to have a unique destination identity. It's designed to be accessible for locals, but attractive to everyone else too. Makes use of the city's pathway network, and especially the 5 Mile Creek pathway, and it will have one of the few crossings under State Highway 16. This is the simplified graphic here is the transportation framework for the plan. Of note, it integrates highways, the local network, transit, and pathways. The local network considers connectivity, access management, and importantly, the land use integration. There's no additional concerted transportation studies planned for this area, though ACHD's master street map and the Parks and Pathway Plan could possibly benefit from some minor tweaks. Related to the transportation framework is the pathway and park framework. This graphic places some more emphasis on the pathway network, but also considers open space and again, the land use integration. The proposed park featured here in the center is near to the Star Macmillan Center, is a general location and is a general location, but in this context, it does consider visibility, access, synergies with the Star Macmillan Center, equitable access from all areas of the planning area, and of course, it's on one of the city's premier pathway networks, the 5 Mile Creek. It was really quick. I'd love to entertain any questions you may have. I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Mr. McClure. I do have one regarding the Star Macmillan Center, I believe you called it. What is the thinking there? I mean, I understand it's the idea it's going to be a neighborhood shopping area, but how do you make that happen as a city? Do you, someone has to prove that they're the right type of business to move in there? Do you zone it so that others can't? How do you, I'm going to have I live out that way. I'm going to have a fun time watching this, but I think it's a good idea. But how do you, at this stage, get it to happen?
Mission President, that's a very good question. So while this is not a land use plan, it is part of the comprehensive plan, which is a core consideration for all entitlement and development applications that the city receives. The city is not going to get into the nuance of which specific uses are appropriate out here. Won't even get into the specifics of the details in an overall building design or, and it could vary from what you see here. In fact, there's several concepts in the plan that show some variations to this one. But we do consider a mix of elements very important. So when any application comes through, we will be looking for that mix. We will be looking for a focus on the sort of main street that you see there, not facing Macmillan, but facing the main street and having an integration with the pathway network and a relationship with the single family homes and multifamily homes surrounding it.
Looking forward to it. Good idea. Anything, gentlemen? Nothing? Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Sergeant Dance, Police Department update, and then I think we've got an item further down in the agenda that you get to do as well, but just an update for now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much of an update as to or what we're currently doing, but I hope that everybody's had a chance to look at some of the charts that have been provided regarding the topic we're going to discuss. And I don't know if you want to move into that or just want me to.
We will take that next if you don't have anything update wise.
Business as usual.
Okay, good. Keep it that way.
I should say I did bring some heavy duty reinforcement today. So got Lieutenant Ford here with us today, who is the lieutenant over our traffic division, and he's got a lot of wisdom and knowledge that I don't.
Well, I'm not even going to comment on that comment. Okay, well, with that, we'll move on into item 4, which is the Eagle Road variable speed limit item. This is something that I first heard about meeting with the mayor and Caleb last week. We'll let you set it up, explain what the question is, and I'm sure the commission will have questions, suggestions, thoughts about it. So go ahead.
Thank you. So I was kind of brought up to speed along with you guys over the last month or so. And it sounds to me like the speed limit on Eagle Road has always been an issue or a topic of discussion, especially as Eagle Road is considered a state highway. And as the growth along the sides of Eagle Road have continued to increase and the population, the traffic increases, the accesses to businesses and other things that have obviously occurred along Eagle Road, I think the speed limits, again, the topic's always been there. Should we leave it as it is, or is it something that we need to reduce for safety reasons? And what I was asked to do is compile some statistics regarding crashes and other factors along Eagle Road. And so that's what these charts represent, is kind of a breakdown of the traffic collisions that we've responded to and taken reports for as an agency from December of 2020 to November of 2021. I think some of the concern with the speed limits is that maybe Eagle Road was never intended to be used as it is now, with the amount of businesses and accesses. I know that there's been some things done over Eagle Road over the past 10 years or so to try and make it safer regarding access to, businesses alongside both Eagle Road. But the concern is with the speed limits being what they are, which is generally 50 to 55 miles an hour, is that excessive for the amount of traffic and the population we have in that area now? So I'll let you guys look at the charts and ask questions as to specifically what questions you might have. I know that it sounds like it's the mayor and the mayor's intent, along with the support of the police department, to request that Eagle Road look into a variable speed limit. All right, request that ITD look into a variable speed limit along Eagle Road. And what that would mean is there would be a specific time during the day where the speed limits would be reduced. And then during the busiest traffic times, obviously. And then in the evening hours or overnight, the speeds would increase to where they're set currently. So with that being said, I'll let the commission ask questions.
Okay, and I'll ask the first one. By variable, you're talking about by time. Are they also thinking about different parts of Eagle Road having different speeds at the same time?
That's my understanding, because right now there's sections of Eagle Road that are 50 miles per hour and there's 55 miles per hour. And so I think that would probably go into discussions and conversations with ITD engineers. And I think there's a lot more data to be collected and discussion to be had there. But that's my understanding.
Okay, Mr. Hood, would you like to elaborate any more on this question, since you were there when it got brought up to me?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was part of the conversation with the chief and the mayor and Caleb Blakey from ITD here a month ago or so. Your question in particular, well, maybe let me approach it this way. So some of the corridor in question is not wholly in Meridian. So I think some of that coordination with Boise and understanding where they are, we didn't ask the question of how often the variable speed limit signs would be put up, or what sections would be lowered to what, or how high. I will just as a side note, a little bit, ITD is interested in, to use the example, non-peak hours, maybe even increasing the speed limit up to 60, maybe, or something higher, if appropriate. So I think some of the study that hasn't been done yet, that was something that they, at least preliminarily, said, let's put that on the table then. Yeah, maybe we drop it down to 40 during, certain times of the day, but maybe it even goes up higher. Let me even jump back further. So yes, speed's been on Eagle Road corridor has been talked about for many years. What really instigated this most recent conversation, though, was the fatality that was had, I believe it was before the end of the year, sometime in December anyways. And real similar conversations. I think some of you were even part of the conversations at the village. We used to be able to turn southbound off of Eagle Road and make the left-hand turn into the village. And that third lane, the two through lanes would stop and people get waved through, and that third lane would come cruising through at 45, 50 miles an hour and people get T-boned. So that's why a lot of the medians went into Eagle Road, and that turning movement is now restricted. Similar situation occurred north of Ustick here, again, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, something like that. And that brought this to the forefront again to talk about speeds and access. I think some of that conversation I wasn't part of, but the part of the conversation I was there for was to talk about variable speeds. And at the end of the day, what was asked by the mayor was to run this by the Transportation Commission, but he would like to co-sign a letter to send to ITD to ask them to consider this corridor for variable speed limits. Again, not I-84 to Chinden. It could go further if ITD wanted to, but Meridian really doesn't have a dog in that fight once you get north of Chinden, but it made sense to at least go from Chinden to I-84. Again, we didn't get into, even some of the technology and what that would take. There's a little talk on that, but how often or how much it would vary from one segment to another. Pine is a good example. You got an arterial that intersects the arterial that isn't a section line road. So could it even vary in between our, half mile intervals? We didn't get into that level of conversation with this, but I'm not trying to put words in Mr. Lakey's mouth, but he was open to at least receiving the letter and looking into it further. That's essentially what I know.
Okay, thank you, sir. A question. I have one more question for the sergeant, and then we'll open it up, commission members. It looks like the majority of the collisions on Eagle Road, according to your charts, are rear end collisions. Is it common knowledge within the traffic enforcement people that rear end collisions are a product of speed or not?
It's difficult to tell a lot of the times, because generally speaking, when we talk about a rear end collision, we look at factors that are easier to determine, such as following too closely or inattention. And especially when there's minor collisions that don't result in injuries or a lot of property damage, the investigation doesn't include speed, determining what the speed was at the time of the collision. Most of the time, these collisions occur during peak hours of traffic, which could be from 7 a.m. all the way through 7 p.m. depending on the day, and the congestion on Eagle Road. And a lot of the times you can't even get up to the speed limit because of the congestion. So when we talk about rear end collision, it's primarily due to lack of, it's due to following too closely, people not giving enough space between each other, the compacted and the congested areas that there's just not a lot of room.
Not necessarily speed.
Correct.
Okay, commissioners,
I have one.
questions, comments? Mr. Ballard.
Sergeant, along those lines on the rear end collisions, and I'll take into the turning areas. Is there statistics on how many people are running the red lights? I mean, yellow doesn't mean anything to a lot of drivers, and I notice, I'm talking for myself. My concern is when I'm approaching a green light going to yellow, somebody's going to push me through the intersection. So my concern there is, is there data on, I get following too close. But pushing traffic through is a concern of mine.
I think there's statistics that we could find that would say how many of these collisions resulted in a citation for failing to obey a traffic signal. It wouldn't specifically make a distinction between running a red light or, turning on a flashing yellow left turn signal without yielding to oncoming traffic. It wouldn't really distinguish that because it all falls under the same failing to yield from a traffic signal. But we could certainly find statistics to see how many of these collisions resulted in a citation or were found to be a result of that.
I mean, by way of follow-up, so I've been driving about 55 years now. And I learned that you can pull out into the intersection on a yellow light and then go ahead and make it even when it turns red. It seems like that's a no man's land now, and you're just asking to be hit by somebody running, so that's part of my question. I think you've answered it.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think a lot of the education that we do is don't start to make that turn unless you can make that turn completely. Don't go out into the middle of the intersection and wait until that light turns red and then complete your turn. My opinion is that you shouldn't start a turn unless you can complete it. So we see a lot of those collisions where that person's waiting on that left turn flashing yellow out in the middle of the intersection. The light goes to red. Meanwhile, oncoming traffic is trying to beat that light as well. And so then you get the collision in the middle of the intersection. And so, yeah, I think the statistics are probably out there that we could compile for the failing to obey its traffic signal, but not distinguishing between specifically running a red light or just failing to yield on a turn.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, wondering if there's any information around generally in aggregate the costs of these collisions, in terms of monetary costs. Obviously, fatality is tragic and can't quantify the cost of that. But in terms of, on a day-to-day level, you think about the economic cost of, reducing a speed limit is to some extent going to, make it take longer for a good or service to arrive at its destination. It imposes some certain level of economic costs. I think it might be valuable to some extent of weighing the cost of those collisions and the damages that could be, medical damages, property damages that could be reduced through reducing the speed limits versus the costs, the economic costs of reducing them as well. So is there any data around that the department has or that of that we could find that quantifies kind of the costs of all these accidents and kind of start hinting at what would be saved by reducing the speed limits?
That I'm not aware of. Yeah, that.
When you write up an accident, you don't have a guesstimated cost of damage?
Well, we have to determine if first we have to determine if the collision is by state law reportable, meaning somebody has to by state law report this to law enforcement. And we're required to take a report on it. And that threshold right now is $1,500 to one vehicle, not both combined. And that's been like that, I think as long as I can remember, at least 10 years. And that's a very low threshold. If you think about how expensive vehicles are and how little it takes to get to that $1,500 threshold. So that's
Beyond that, y'all don't take a wild guess that this was a $26,000 crash.
no.
Okay.
Even that, no.
Mr. Chair. I can add to that a little bit.
Please.
So the Ada County Highway District actually does put evaluation to property damage only, fatalities, and can't remember the third tier. But if you look at their programming, there is a societal cost for those. Don't ask me how the fatality, what's that worth, right? But there is a dollar amount. What I don't know if we can do is then, how many crashes may this save? But we do, there is a general known of how much it costs for those types of things. So I don't know, again, if we can do that math, because I don't know that we're there with, again, what we're avoiding, but we can tell you what it costs when there are crashes that way. And I can dig that up and email that to you all if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, knowing that there's that calculation and that's at least a thought is helpful and, resolves most, if not all of my concerns, but I would still love to see that, just out of curiosity.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
This seems 410 accidents. It's a lot. Like, is this probably the busiest place for you guys for watching accidents and responding to accidents? And this doesn't, and there's probably a reason, just not very smart, but this does not include Chinden. This is just Macmillan South. And I don't know if there's anyways, regardless, 410, seems like a lot of time that you guys are spending doing that instead of maybe more better things.
Yes, it is. It's one of our busiest roads, obviously, in the city that we take crashes on. And it's due to the congestion, the amount of traffic. This is the 410 collisions. That's only what's reported to us. That doesn't include people that get into minor fender benders and exchange information on their own and go about their day. So it would be interesting to know how much of that actually occurs and how much of that would impact the total number. But yes, you are correct. And it is just from Macmillan to Overland. So generally what is in our city limits here.
Okay. I just think the cost of time just for the police department this is something that could reduce that cost. That seems pretty significant.
Chairman. I would invite our two traffic engineers because I'm familiar with general concept, and I think the highway district had predicted a speed on State Street as to what the volume could be. And so there is a mathematical model out there as to, let's say, an optimal speed, even if it is reduced, because you got to move X number of cars along that corridor. And so I think that has to be taken into account. And if there's variable speed, what seems to make some sense during the time, that's going to take somebody with some sophisticated calculations to figure that out. Lancaster, did that trigger any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
Mr. Ballard. So I probably ought not to speak on this particular item too much, but I'll speak generally.
Generally.
Yeah. So you've heard me say in our meetings before that if done correctly, speed limits should seem high, right? So they should not be minimums, they should be maximums, right? It should feel uncomfortable to drive the speed limit. And the reasons for that we've talked about before, you don't set speed limits to what you want people to drive. You set it to what most people are driving so that you're not making lawbreakers out of otherwise law-abiding citizens, right? So as far as, optimal speeds and that sort of thing, Yes, but they're not necessarily the speed limit, right? The speed limit should be higher than the optimal speed. Because it's a maximum, again, not a minimum or preferred, it's a maximum, right? So, yeah, I guess that's my reply to your question, Commissioner Ballard, if I've answered it.
No, I just putting that in because we've been asked to consider joining in on a letter to say, yeah, would you look at variable speeds on this road?
So to Mr. Lancaster, how do you determine if a speed limit is too high? Is crash data one of them? Is that kind of thing? I think in the 85th percentile is what you want cars traveling. If the speed limit is 60, you want to be able to show that the majority of cars are traveling at 85% of that. Or do I have any clue what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So you're right, that crashes are included. So you look at how fast vehicles are traveling, how fast are 85% of the vehicles traveling, so that you're concentrating your policing efforts on the 15% that are fastest, right? The fastest 15%. But yes, you look at crashes. So usually the two main inputs are observed speed and reported crashes. So if crashes are higher than normal for that type of facility, then that could be reason for rounding down a speed limit. So, speed limits are always increments of 5 miles per hour, 60, 65, 70, 75. And so you might round down instead of round up, or be based on average speed. But yes, crashes would factor in. But, like Commissioner Shoemaker was saying earlier, is this higher crashes than should be expected? And that, that gets into crash rate, right? You could have a high number of crashes on a certain road, but you also may have a huge number of vehicles using it. And so your actual crash rate might be smaller than normal, even though it seems like a big number, right? So, it's really the crash rate that matters more than the actual number. I hope that kind of answered your question, Mr. Chairman.
It helps. I don't know if I personally want to be a part of some 101 saying the speed limit is too high on Eagle Road, we need to lower it without some basis in fact. I believe that everybody in a neighborhood will swear the majority of the cars in front of their house are doing 45 miles an hour, even if they aren't. They look fast because they're going by your kids and your dog and all that. Mr. Hood, I know you haven't had a chance, but were you going to check with ITD to see if they have any speed data on Eagle Road that they could make available to?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I can do that. I don't know what data may be out there. I know that was something that the mayor was hoping to get, just so we're considering these things as we make these requests and we're not doing them anecdotally, that there is something to some facts to base this request off, although it is just a request for them to look at it more and see if it's feasible. I will just kind of in the line, if you don't mind. So I will look into that some more and see what type of information ITD may have on the corridor regarding speeds. I will just say, when we've talked about this historically, this is years ago now, but a lot of the crashes, and I'm not going to cite my sources because I don't remember what they were at this point, but the technical term even I can't remember, but the speed differentiation had a lot to do with the crashes. So it's signed 55. I have an expectation of a driver, I can go 55 because even though it's a maximum, traffic's going 35, but I'm zipping in and out of traffic because it says 55. I can go 55. You can't pull me over. It says 55. But that's where a lot of the crashes were happening, was people going around people and trying to weave in and out because it's my right to go 55. And so I think that was, again, I don't know the percentage of those crashes, but there was quite a bit of the speed differentiation of people going what the rest of people are going, and then these others that are frustrated that it's signed so high. So the idea with some of this and the technology that's out there may be a good corridor for those certain times of day where it's not feasible to go 50 or 55, or not practical, or not safe, however you want to couch that. There could be a control center that could change that and say, you know, it's 45 for a little bit, and then it could go back up to 55 or whatever. So anyways, just something else to consider in that equation with driver behavior and some of the at least historic crash data on Eagle Road when this was talked about before.
Chairman,
Mr. Ballard.
I think there's one other factor to take into account. And that is 2 more sections of Eagle Road that will, as developments come on, there's going to be a higher volume on Eagle Road. There's a development going on at Franklin and Eagle. And down the road, there will be the development at Fairview and Eagle. So that's going to just increase the number of cars to put on that road, whether you like it or not. So just taking into account that it is a capacity issue, and there's got to be some discussion on if it can be made safer, how do you make it safer? And the guy that weaves in and out, Mr. Hood, I'd suggest that officer over there knows a citation for that kind of driving. Anyway, that's my comment.
Mr. Chair. I know Mr. Lancaster didn't want to talk too much on this, but I'm kind of going to force his hand a little bit. I also, you know, as kind of a layman on this subject, I wanted to know some of the thoughts around, you know, you talk about it should be uncomfortable to drive the speed limit. So to my mind, that sounds like if we were to lower the speed limit, we should also, in some sense, you want to lower the comfort or the amount, the speed at which one feels comfortable driving. So I'm just curious, thoughts around, you know, kind of defensive design. And, you know, I know there are a lot of areas, especially by the village, where, you know, the plats that are still kind of for sale or yet to be developed, kind of some wide open land, really like far sight vision. I know that makes people more comfortable driving faster. So just curious to hear thoughts, you know, from anyone, but, you know, you've kind of already spoken up, so I'm kind of volunteering you a little bit. But yeah, any thoughts on that would be appreciated.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smith. So, yeah, I mean, there's kind of two approaches, right? So you can you know, you design for driver error, which leads to everything wider and more forgiving, right? Which typically leads to higher speeds. There's some intentional design for lower speeds, but you know, often, I mean, there's a trade-off, right? So at one end you have interstate highways and freeway type facilities, and then at the other end you've kind of got the street in front of your house, right? Where one is designed for moving a lot of people and goods quickly without interference, right? The other is all access and, you know, kids playing soccer in the street and all that, right? And so where do you fit on that spectrum in between? You know, in general, highways, designated state highways, US highways, that sort of thing are designed differently than, you know, roads that aren't. So, and so that's kind of where it's at.
Mr. Hood, a question that's not what we're thinking about or talking about, but I'm just curious, in your time here, have they or did they ever talk about having Eagle Road with frontage roads? I know you're not going to go back and do it now, but was that ever in the mix back when it was just intersections and county, not a county, but a busy out in the county road?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I don't know how long you think I've worked for the city. My time doesn't go back that far, but yeah, I mean, we actually still have in our comprehensive plan now a policy for frontage backage roads on all state highways, including Eagle Road. And we're getting some pieces of that, but close to the interstate, yeah, a lot of that framework was done, before planning was really a thing here in Meridian. So in retrospect, we definitely could have done a better job of that. I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, probably not too much, but
A curiosity question.
again, yes, and particularly for the newer sections the success rate on implementing that has left a lot to be desired.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Lewis.
well, that question just brought back to my mind, in the late 1990s, Washington Group International did a traffic study and a recommendation at the intersection of Eagle and Fairview. And at that time, they recommended that it be an interchange, like a single point urban interchange. And of course, that never happened in traffic. Of course, that was just after Eagle Road had been widened from 2 lanes to 5 lanes. So people, I guess, didn't believe it, and it never happened. But that's water under the bridge, so to speak. Just some other thoughts I've had on this discussion. The setting of speed limits, Mr. Lancaster went into a lot of the detail that goes into that, and speed limits have to be set by engineering study. And on this commission, we've often requested that speed studies be done, whether it's on ACHD roads or on ITD roads, and we've seen those results come back over the years on different facilities. And it's not an insignificant task to do those studies, but as far as variable speed limits go, I believe I've only seen 2 installations in Idaho where those have been set up. I-15 north of Idaho Falls, where they have the problem with fog, I believe is one of the dust. And so when those dust conditions occur, then ITD will lower the speed limit on that section of I-15. And then I've seen here in the work zones over by Caldwell that they've put some variable speed limit signs there. It's a difficult thing to do for several reasons. First, the requirement that speed limits be set by an engineering study. That requires you have an engineer always available to make those decisions. The technology to make that happen, like for example, with Eagle Road being a state highway, I mean, that would mean that ITD would have to have the infrastructure in place to monitor speeds all the time, because I don't think that setting speed limit by time of day is going to accomplish what we want here, because we want if a recurring congestion is our problem, and that speeds during certain times of day are lower because of the congestion, we want to react to when it's happening and not just say from a certain time of day to a certain time of day, because you might not have the congestion always, or you might have more congestion or a little bit less than what's normal. So it would have to be a dynamic installation. And a lot of infrastructure would have to be built to make that happen. And it would probably involve a partnership with ACHD, frankly, because ACHD has the infrastructure or at least some of it that it could start to happen. Anyway, that's probably all I want to say for now.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leclerc.
thank you. Just a really small note. I like the information we have in front of us. It's helpful and informative. And I don't know if we'll need more, but if we take it, if we have to run another shot at this someday, we have 410 crashes over a 12-month period that are reported. Sidebar, but it might be interesting to see, well, what's the trend been up to now? And maybe you guys have seen those numbers. If you have, let us know. And so if this is if 410 is, last year was lower and the year before was lower, there have been efforts made to reduce access with curbs and stuff blocking left turns and stuff. So it might be that this number's been flat, or maybe it's even gone down if those efforts have been made. But so I guess I have one other thing to talk about, but if the officers are aware of looking in previous years, what the trend is, that might be helpful to us.
Okay.
Have that?
Anyone else?
I have one other comment.
Mr. Ballard.
Mr. Lewis raised an interesting point about the dynamics, the fluidity. Keep in mind that on the southernmost end of Eagle Road before Overland is the hospital. And when the emergency vehicles go through there and control the lights, it's my understanding it takes about 5 synchronizations all along the entire length of Eagle to get back in sync. And so there's a number of challenges as to that traffic flow. Out. Some days at 10 o'clock, there's very few cars. Other days, I've seen it a couple miles long. So anyway, there's just various conditions out there. Yeah. If the question is, do we sign off on a study? I'm for one to say, yeah, let's study it.
Mr. Chairman.
Hey, a question I've got for Mr. Lewis. Were you going so far as to infer that it's too complicated to put variable speeds on Eagle Road? I mean, I can understand how all these different factors get in it, how interactive it has to be. Is it really a matter of possibly it can't be done?
Mr. Chairman, no, it can be done. It's just a question of expense and the willingness to do it. It's not a simple thing, but it can be done.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I believe the officers have an answer to my question.
Mr.
Yes, sir, Sergeant.
Yeah, thank you. Our answer to Mr. Leclerc's question as to whether or not we could compile some of the data over the last 5 years or so, that would, yeah, we could do that. Lieutenant Ford had a good comment stating that it could be a little bit skewed over the last couple of years, just based on, we all know what impact COVID has had on the workforce and the amount of people having to travel to and from work. So just as a thought, I mean, we could compile that information, but it could be skewed a little bit.
The other thing to put with that would be whether or not ITD had traffic counts for those years. And then we could lay those counts against the accidents and see if we see any ratios that we're interested in.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
so about the general question the mayor's office has, I'm not sure that I would want to ask for variable speeds on Eagle Road. I think what we want to ask is, can the speeds be lowered? I mean, it's that's what's important to our city. It's not, do we ramp it up, at 1 a.m.? that's not a big issue to me. Maybe to ITD, but it concerns me that we would have a wide range of different speeds at different times of day. I don't think that's what we want, and I don't think that's what the mayor's meeting was about. Maybe Chairman Steed can clarify, but it seems like the interest in the meeting was to get slower speed limits to reduce collisions. And I suppose if the only way to do that is a variable speed limit proposal, then they can come back and tell us that. But I think the mayor's letter and the position of the city and us is not so much that we're excited about variable speed limits and the cost and complications and changing expectations that would involve. We're just interested in lower speeds and safer conditions on the road. I think that's all we need to say in our letter. I don't think we need to ask for variable speed limits on the corridor. So that's my feedback to this request.
It was posed to the Transportation Commission as variable. Mr. Hood, where did variable come from?
Well, again, Mr. Chair, I don't know the origin necessarily of that, but that certainly was the tone of the conversation I was a part of. I will just say, sort of as an aside, I brought it up in that meeting. I mean, it's not the only option. I mentioned putting in curb gutter, sidewalk, and maybe even narrowing the travel lanes and putting up some real vertical obstructions in the center of it. That'll slow people down. So if we really want to affect this, engineer the speed then to 35 or 40, you can do things. This isn't the only tool in the toolbox, but this was the thing that was getting the most momentum. There may be a way where we can word this letter that gets to the heart of our concern as a community about speeds and maybe even safety to some degree, and not say it has to be variable speed limits. But that was the majority of our conversation as a potential to do what Mr. Leclerc just mentioned.
Mr. Hood, were you a little surprised at what sounded to me like a very quick, we can look at that from ITD? As opposed to what I would have expected, which would have been, we'll be happy to look at that.
Well, let me,
in terms of, it was almost like a positive, we can work toward doing that, as opposed to we will look to see if it's really needed or not.
yeah, and again, it's unfortunate that Mr. Lakey's not here to give you his side of the one conversation I was there. He didn't guarantee anything. He is going to need to talk with others in his organization and see if this makes sense for a lot of the reasons you all have already brought up. But there was some optimism in his voice when he thought, if any corridor, this one may make sense, right? The door was cracked open anyways, at least from his perspective. It wasn't a hard no. But again, he didn't really guarantee anything other than give me the letter and I'll talk with some other folks and we'll see if this is a viable solution. So I guess I was a little surprised to hear that. I will say it isn't, Commissioner Lewis mentioned I-15 in Caldwell and I-84. It's not against state code and there's no rule making necessarily, but it would be something that isn't current practice very much in the state. So I think that's why he was a little hesitant to go too far with this, but I think he understands some of the city's concern.
Another question for you. Are we under a timeline, this commission?
Mr. Chair, that didn't come up. I do know that this is, the mayor has asked me about the status of this. So I do know that there is some urgency, but not necessarily a timeline. Again, I don't know what's been all the conversations, but I do know he has talked to the family that was in that crash that was mentioned earlier and has told them we're having conversations and something will move forward. So I don't think this is we can delay it too long. I think he wants to do something with this.
And I'm not suggesting delaying it. I'm just trying to get a feeling for whether or not I should push for an absolute answer out of this group today or not. From what I'm hearing, I'm not sure they're quite prepared to do that, although Mr. Leclerc has come fairly close. Sergeant, do either one of you know if speed was a factor in that fatality that they're talking about?
Mr. Chairman, we can't say that definitively. I don't believe we even have. Again, it happened in Boise City jurisdiction.
Okay.
So it was a crash that occurred there that a reconstruction expert, to my knowledge, is still completing. So I don't know if that has been determined yet.
Mr. Hood, another question. What would be the possibility of having ITD come talk to us about this topic?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think hi, and we can certainly invite him. I mean, you typically have someone here. So, yeah, I don't know if Justin joined us today. Is he online? Yeah, and I don't know if he's.
Yeah,
prepared to
I'm here.
Put him on the spot, but it looks like either Miranda unmuted him or you.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. I am here.
Mr. Price, welcome. We glad to have you. Would you care to weigh in, sir?
Sure. Is there a specific thing, like a specific part you want me to weigh in on? I guess I could give some background as far as Eagle Road and variable speed limits. So I know it's been a topic that has been discussed some over the last few years. So I think that's probably went into, I would assume, Mr. Lakey and the mayor's discussion is because it was a topic before. So we have not collected any speed information recently on Eagle Road to do a speed study. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and if I have the answers, I'm happy to answer them. If I don't, I'm happy to collect the necessary information.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard.
I've heard a comment earlier on that we're asked to make a recommendation to get a study going on the speed on Eagle Road, and one of those considerations would be whether variable speed would be a solution or a possible solution. And I would make the motion that this commission today signs off on a letter requesting that that study move forward, and if one of those considerations is variable speed, that's one of the considerations. I leave it to the people with the science and the expertise.
That's a motion.
That is a motion.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Second by Mr. Leclerc. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, you're asking for a broad kind of study on speed,
Yeah.
not just on variable speed. but
Well, that's
that
what I
comes up.
heard, is
Okay.
that they move forward and we say, yeah, we think it's a good idea in the study, and one of them is variable speed, and that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that would include possible other things like a fixed speed or design elements as well.
That's
To
what
your
the
mind?
engineers can figure out.
Okay.
yes.
Other discussion.
Mr.
I
Steed,
have to admit, y'all have surprised me today a little bit.
can I ask for, I just want to make
Discussion.
sure I have it written down verbatim, motion to recommend speed study on Eagle Road
Yes.
Okay.
And that.
with
includes-
consideration for variable speeds?
And one of the considerations of variable speed would be.
one of.
the solutions. I say one of the solutions.
Thank you.
Okay, you've heard the motion. We have a second. Everybody understand the question? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster,
may I quickly note that I'm abstaining from that vote,
that will be fine.
if that'll show up in our meeting minutes, just in case anyone should ask.
But if you'd like, we can put that in bold.
No, bold is not necessary, just I'm abstaining from that particular vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you all. Next item, Ustick Road, 10 mile to Linder Center median options, Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So I have the next one, as Miranda briefly mentioned, she did the project updates at the beginning of the agenda. I am the city's team member at ACHD going through the design and of this project. And one of the things that they are including in the concept study that's really going into design now are there still will be a center two-way left turn lane, but access management is actually pretty good in this mile. So I'm between Linder and Black Cat. 10 mile, sorry, Linder and 10 mile. Black Cat's coming up too. They're going to design that one here right away as well. But they have, again, the center two-way median and then center two-way turn lane and a median where there's no turning movements. So they asked the city if we're interested on partnering to green those areas up. ACHD is not interested in something that's of higher maintenance. I don't want to say high maintenance, but basically no maintenance. So they'll hardscape it, they'll pave it, they may even stamp a concrete. But basically what our community will get is a hardscape center median with concrete pavement in the middle and probably a 36-inch barrier around the curbs, basically in the medians. So they said, hey, if you guys are interested, you can landscape those. They have some standards for what can go in there too, but we could landscape them and then we'd be on the hook for maintaining them. When I put the memo together, so hopefully you do have your packet handy. There's some exhibits of different sections in there. You can see the segments of center median. There's about 1,900 linear feet, and there'd be about 8 or 9 feet of the inside of those that could be landscape potentially. So there's an example of one. That's one of the shorter median areas. Some of them are quite long, I think 600-700 feet even for a couple of them. I did get some information from the Parks Department. They do anticipate at a cost of about $75 a linear foot to landscape it and about $5,000 a year to maintain it if we're so inclined. So just something to factor in would be the ongoing maintenance. I will also just mention, so right now ACHD's kind of standard practice, which is tied into their policy for the most part, talks about non-transportation components that a community wants is the responsibility of that partner community to put in and maintain. In this situation, this is kind of a gray area where, almost like we were talking about on Eagle Road a little bit, the medians are put in for transportation purposes. Here they are actually engineering to a design speed. If they were just to not have the center medians, people would want to go 50 miles an hour and they would sign it as such. So there is a traffic reason why they're putting these center medians in a vertical obstruction. What the vertical obstruction is, again, is they're open to other treatments there. So again, there is some cost, but in this case, ACHD may, this hasn't been asked yet, may actually do the initial installation because they have to put something in there anyways. As long as the city, what I know they don't want to do is the ongoing maintenance of that. They don't want to trim trees and shrubs and clean up leaves and if there's a break with, irrigation system and those types of things. So I guess it's really sort of a multi-part question to you all. I will be taking this to the city council to see what they think about this, but I wanted to get your recommendation or thoughts or considerations on, it's largely aesthetic in this community. We can make it look nicer. It's still going to essentially be the same roadway, but at what cost? Is it worth at least $5,000 a year, and is it worth, $200,000? I don't know. The other thing I will say, and why at the beginning of my presentation, Miranda actually had a similar conversation with them on, was it Lake Hazel or Eagle? I can't remember now, that area. Lake Hazel corridor? Okay. We had a similar situation on another roadway. And in that case, they weren't interested because it would sort of be one, it was a segment out there that didn't have any context to any other segments. We weren't doing center medians in any other of them. And it just kind of it felt out of place. It didn't create any real value here there's an opportunity for the corridor to have medians. And that's something we've talked to ACHD about is, again, I mentioned at the beginning, the next mile to the west is going into design almost concurrently. And then the third mile that would eventually tie in with State Highway 16 at the county line is not far behind. So there's a real opportunity to create this welcoming kind of sense if you get off of State Highway 16 at Ustick and come into Meridian that welcomes you, if you will, into Meridian. A boulevard feel that wouldn't just be this mile kind of buried in the middle of the city, but it could be from an interchange at Ustick and bring you all the way in. And we even have gone as far as to talk about maybe retrofitting the next mile to Meridian Road. And so you potentially could have 4 miles of center median that is consistent and a corridor improvement. And Ustick's a pretty highly trafficked roadway. So again, it really is aesthetics though. I mean, we're talking about making it prettier and not so industrial or sterile. But there is a cost obviously to do that. So
A question, if I may, $5,000 a year in maintenance for 2,000 linear feet. If the 2,000 linear feet is 10 miles to Linder. How much more are you talking about to go on to Black Cat and beyond to 16?
So Mr. Chair, it's a fair question. Without looking, so again, there would be breaks in these so that you can do the turning movements. We haven't gotten there yet. We aren't into design. This project is ahead of the next mile a little bit, and they're just getting into 30% plans and those types of things. But it's going to be very, very similar. So ballpark, these are ballpark numbers. We aren't there to design. This is something from the lawn code that just said, hey.
So 5,000
per mile.
Per mile.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, 150,000. If whoever does it, it's going to be roughly $150,000 to put in the initial landscape materials, the sleeving for your irrigation, so you could times that by 3. But that would be kind of something to consider. If you do this mile, you're not necessarily committed to doing the next 2 miles. But think about that anyways, that there may be that compound request.
Okay, commissioners, thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just a couple of quick questions for Caleb. I believe on 10 Mile Road south of Franklin all the way to the interchange, there are some landscaped medians there. And I think it's kind of a xeriscape, low maintenance treatment. Does the city have an arrangement with ACHD right now to maintain those?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lewis, yes, we do. And that was actually done when the interchange went in. And I can't remember so that's an ACHD roadway, but it was done with ITD as part of that project to put those medians in. And that landscaping, just to be quite frank, won't look like this. There's another segment actually on the other side of the interstate too that for a long time didn't have any landscaping in it, but was a center median. But yes, the city's on the hook to maintain those. We do it through a third party. It's not city employees, but we do contract out that and are responsible for that.
And just an aside, y'all use reclaimed water to water that 10 mile 84 interchange landscaping, don't you?
Correct. That's about the extent of the purple pipe.
Other commissioners? Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just just to be clear, I think that the stamped concrete hardscape is atrocious, and I think we should be doing something different. But I think it's a question of whether we want to do like a xeriscape low maintenance or a more irrigated grass trees kind of a treatment. I think that's
maybe yet to be decided. Maybe
yeah,
no hardscape. Let's do something different.
Yeah, that's a question that'll have to be talked about eventually. And just some thoughts I had when I was looking through this. I like the general design with the buffer strip between the curb and the sidewalk, or rather the multi-use path. Excuse me. I like that there's multi-use paths on both sides of the street. The thing I don't care for is, I was reading through the history of it in here, and the two-way left turn lane was reduced from 13 feet to 11 feet. I'm not a fan of that. I think two-way left turn lanes need to be wider for the maneuvering that goes on there. So I'd prefer that go back to 13. And then I'm also concerned that on a principal arterial street, we don't have any 12-foot lanes for trucks and buses. I would prefer at least the outside lanes be 12 feet wide, but I realize that this project is probably too far along in the design process to make changes like that, but I still don't care for it.
Other thoughts, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard?
I'm in favor of some landscaping besides the aesthetics. Maybe it helps with traffic flow as far as slowing traffic down or being more cautious. That's a personal thought. I don't have science behind that.
There is science behind it.
And then and I agree with Mr. Lewis's comments about the width of traffic, but there again, if you have an 11-foot lane, it takes a little more skill to thread that needle. So you are going a little bit slower. So you are balancing some of those. And just other things to consider, but if it's the landscaping, I like that idea.
Thank you, sir. Others?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Leckie?
I would kind of like to echo Commissioner Ballard's comments. I think I'm in favor for at least having some type of landscaping over there, whether that's, a higher maintenance irrigated or, something a little bit more trim. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's definitely worth putting, at least some money and maintenance into landscaping the section of road.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I do wonder in terms of and this might be putting the cart before the horse, but in terms of the level of maintenance, et cetera, I know you mentioned there were discussions of extending this further. One, in terms of reducing kind of water use is always great. If it can be done while still maintaining the aesthetics. But two, also, if we're reducing maintenance costs, that could potentially, extend our ability to kind of increase the length at which this kind of potential retrofit that you're talking about could be done. So I echo all the sentiments, but would like to voice kind of a mild preference towards something that's lower maintenance if possible. But obviously, again, I'm far from an expert. That's just kind of a personal bias, I guess, if you will. And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Seeing the kind of silence, I'd like to make a motion as such.
Please.
So just to make sure, a motion supporting landscaping, and I would include, and this is up for, it can be discussed. I'm happy to amend this out if it's not favorable, but supportive landscaping with a preference toward lower maintenance landscaping if possible.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I would second.
I heard Mr. Leckie first, so he gets the second. Discussion. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Hood, do you need anything else on that topic?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, item number 6 under new business is review of duties and powers. The tag team, Mrs. Carson and Mr. Hood. And I'm not sure who's going to go first, but I'm sure one of you will.
Mr. Chair, I'll go. I want to share my screen real quick so we're all looking at the same thing. If I can. I'm going to switch switch windows here. All right. So there was some confusion, miscommunication last month regarding the letter from ACHD, or I'm sorry, the letter to ACHD from the Transportation Commission recommending some speed studies and whether that would be done directly from the commission, from whether that should, at the staff level, there was some confusion about whether that should be from the mayor's office, council, straight from the commission. So after that letter was sent, there was then some confusion from the commission members regarding why it was sent that way. So I wanted to clarify, apologize that that was a miscommunication, that in the future, those kinds of letters will come from the Transportation Commission. And just clarify what the duties and responsibilities are of the commission so that we can avoid those confusions in the future. So I did put up here the commission authority. So there is in chapter 7 of Meridian Code, there, item number 3, that the commission can act on motorist, pedestrian, and bicyclist concerns that are brought forth by citizens that relate to safety of the traveling public. So in this case, for this speed study, it would have been appropriate for the Transportation Commission to make that recommendation directly to ACHD. There is also there in item 1 on that same code that the commission will make recommendations to city council on traffic safety and transportation matters. So just reaching to legal and getting some more clarification on that. Some easy guidelines to read that would be if the recommendation or act that Transportation Commission wants to take is a request that's being made to a staff level at ACHD, or I assume the same would go for ITD. If it's a Transportation Commission to staff level request without any city dollars attached to that request, then the commission is more than welcome, encouraged to move forward on those kinds of recommendations and requests. If it's something that's going to some elected body, the boards or commissions, then that would need to come from city council. So it would be Transportation Commission recommendation to city council to then take that to the other elected board or commission. Also, if there's any city dollars attached, then this commission wouldn't have the authority to allocate those dollars. That authority only lies with city council. So anything with city dollars attached would need to be a recommendation from the commission to city council. And then I can stand for any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hood.
Maybe
I heard you, but couldn't see you. Go ahead.
Maybe before, if you have any questions for Miranda, just my role in this, I played a big role in the miscommunication. So I wasn't at your January meeting. I got back from vacation. Miranda, kind of gave me the lowdown on what happened, and I either missed it in the conversation, but I'm the one that directed her to have the mayor sign it. The topic of records came up with the council. I knew he was here and had talked to you, but I thought there was a question in there from her to me saying, hey, what should I do with this letter next? Not knowing that your motion or your action or your intent was to just have the chair send it on. I think that would have been appropriate. I thought there was a question from her to me, and I'm the one that said, well, let's have the mayor sign it and kind of close the loop with him so he knows that y'all saw it and that we're going to ask this of ACHD. So I'm sorry for the miscommunication there. And we've already talked, and I think this is a good refresher too, just so everybody knows, what your duties are and your asks are. And so anyways, I just wanted to, I don't know if that's a confession, but just the rest of the story of what kind of happened here. It's largely my fault because I asked Miranda to do something that wasn't the intent, I understand, of this board. So I apologize for that.
Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Miranda and Caleb. Certainly, nothing upset, and I appreciate the refresher, just like you say. And as I recall from our discussion last month, and this is something that we do from time to time, and our partners at ACHD have been very good to work with this way, but I wasn't, as I recall, I think I made the motion for that last month and, wasn't intending any letter, just for it to be as informal as, us requesting this from ACHD staff, which which we've done probably a dozen times over the last, few years. And so, just very informal like that, say, we as a group, Mr. Martin, will you please do this and report back to us?
Well,
That informality. So
Yeah,
anyway.
I went to the memo or letter level, thinking that would be a written record to make sure we got in there what you had in your motion to ask for. So that was what I was anticipating, was probably just a memo from the Transportation Commission, because we had either been told, or I had been told, could we request directly, and was told, as long as you weren't spending city money, you can. So anyway, anything else on that? Yes, sir.
Along Mr. Lancaster's comments, I'm thinking back on how we made this. But I was thinking, and I'm not trying to graybeard anybody, but with a half dozen years on this committee, I thought what we had done, or commission, excuse me, was consistent with previous practice, but I'm not relying upon that. But I thought it was an informal request for a speed study, and if there has to be the proper protocol, then that is the proper protocol. So I appreciate the refresher that maybe we did step out of bounds, but it seemed consistent with what we had done over the last half dozen years that I've been here.
I don't think we stepped out of bounds.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just reinforce that, I think what Mr. Lancaster and what Mr. Ballard is used to, I think works just fine. Again, I heard Miranda say, Commission wants to write a letter to ACHD requesting this. And so we did, and it was like, well, who should sign it? Well, let's just have the mayor. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, I think it was just a little bit of enough of a, just missed each other with how we're there. I mean, there's no real harm or foul here, just that I think there were some expectations. And again, I think going forward, as Ms. Carson just mentioned, as long as it doesn't really cost the city any resources, you can ask AC if they're willing to do a study for us, to look at those things. They've been accommodating and a partner for us. So it doesn't need to be super formal. I like the idea of creating a record, but we can even do that with email real quick and just say, hey, per our Transportation Commission, Sean, will you please look at this and let me know if you have any questions, type of thing. It doesn't need to be super formal.
And then that would go into, Mr. Chair, if I may, that would go into the record the next month in the staff communications. So then it would become formal in the record that way.
Everybody good?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leclerc?
So the mayor's office understands this. We're not going to be making all these requests through their office in the future, where there's no expectation that we have to have the mayor sign requests like this in the future. Just
I'll speak for that one. I have not asked that question directly, but yes, and I will raise my hand, let Miranda know, whatever, say, hey, this one probably needs to come from the mayor's office. I think we kind of generally know where that line is, but when it's a request for more data or analysis, I have not heard any concern with that.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Lancaster?
can I sidebar off of that just a tiny bit? So I note that we don't have a city councilor on our roll call attendance. Mr. Councilman Kavanagh last month said he wouldn't be joining us anymore, but are we going to have anybody joining us? Because he often.
Would you like to answer that one?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lancaster. Yeah, so the city council has made a decision across the board that they are not going to be serving on any of the city's commissions going forward. I think I generally understand all the whys, but you will not have a city council person on this commission or any other commission, at least with the currently sitting city council members.
And it was explained to me by the mayor that it was a matter of time consideration on the part of council members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have been told that we are free to reach out to any of the council people if we have a question in terms of things like that. Okay. Moving on, staff communications, Mrs. Carson. Did the staff communicate this month?
We did communicate. There are only a few communications here, Mr. Chair. The I-84 corridor operations plan, there were minutes in the last month's packet as well that had that information, but this is the, some more next steps that came from Hunter Mulhall that I wanted to make sure you had access to. We did have some citizen inquiry on some Stoddard improvements, which is something that a project that ACHD is working on with our Parks Department now. So communicated that to them. The Chinden West newsletter, they don't send that newsletter in regular intervals. It comes out as on an as needed basis. So you haven't, I don't think that there was one of those in last month's packet, but there is a Chinden West update there. It's the same as what was in your project memo. The Idaho Walk Bike Alliance does send a newsletter. I don't always include that in the packet. This month I did include some of the links in the packet because I felt those were information that you may want. So this is a nonprofit organization that sends out a newsletter with transportation information. There were a lot. There was 3 different links there that I thought you might be interested in with some policy surveys, and then a fact sheet on some new federal grants and some legislative updates for the state of Idaho. So included those just for your fun to read.
I thought your response to Mrs. Pence was excellent. Took care of that, her question. Apparently, according to her, satisfied her for the time being. And I'm tickled to see that they're going to start widening Chinden, the remaining part between Eagle and Black Cat this spring and summer and fall. So whoop-de-doo. Okay, next item is the Ordinance and Development Subcommittee update from Mr. Leclerc, who met this afternoon at 2:30 for a little bit.
Yes, we did, Mr. Chairman. So we've been working on how best to review development, and can we get a process in place? It's just a very difficult thing. There's so much activity that impacts transportation that's hard for us to, hard for us to really identify what we need to do. So it's just going to be on a case-by-case basis, I think, as we find out, as we watch development occur, do we have questions, and we'll just have to monitor it. And so we're doubtful that a formal process can be developed. But we'll still work on it and think about it, but we just don't see how the volume of work can be sifted by the volunteers on our subcommittee to try to analyze these as they develop. And it's not just as they pass, because we see them as they pass, but often the questions and complaints and troubles start once ground is broken. And so it's really kind of after the fact addressing complaints, which is what we do without a formal process here anyways. As a 200 unit development goes in, is the turn lane enough? Is there conflict with left turns? Yeah, we hear all that, and if there's nearby neighbors that get upset, we get those complaints. We do have an interest in our committee hearing those, and maybe that we don't have to bring the complainant in to testify or something. But if we hear from complaints about how a development is impacting adjacent neighborhoods, we'd like to see that initial contact that staff gets from the public. So that's a place we want to be. And so it's not really a formal review process, but it's more of I don't want to use the word enforcement, but it's sort of a reactive. We're ready to listen and make changes when the public has concerns, kind of a stature. So that's how I think we see our role developing on that side of the house with development is development impact review, not so much at the front end of the process where we're working on planning and stuff. That all has to happen. And it happens in the environment it happens in. And there's so much going on that the development may not break ground for 2 years. And then by then it's a different, transportation environment in that neighborhood. And we can all look at that and get involved. That's where we want to be, I think, on that development side of our house. Then on ordinances, we had a workshop we listened to, the council had on December 21st regarding downtown parking. But it mostly was just kind of a report. I didn't see a lot of back and forth about direction that is any kind of question to resolve. So we're not going to take action on that one. The other areas were some of our future topics we've sort of sifted through. The one that we do want to hear more about, and in March, we're going to ask the police department to give us a report. I don't know if it will end up at the full commission, but we just want to hear an initial report on how the hands-free ordinance thing is going. There was an ordinance and then the state law came in, and there was concern that first year about how enforceable it is under the state law's new regime. And so a follow up on that, I think, would be good, and we can handle that. I don't think it will rise to a level the whole commission has to engage on, but we'll see. This may be something we want to pursue if the state law is not, functional for our police department to really make a difference. If we want to ask legislators, we go through the council and the mayor for that. But if we wanted to get some kind of change in that law, if that's needed or not. So we'll be in touch with them, and hopefully, and again, it may be a non-issue, but we wanted to follow up and see if it is an issue still, if there's enforcement challenges with it, and if any ordinance or state law needs to be, if that issue needs to be addressed or not. So we're going to explore that at our next meeting. That's all I have, and thank you for listening. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Leclerc?
Mr. Chairman,
Lancaster.
I have one comment. So when I opened my utility bill this past month, I happened to read the mayor's message in there, which I do sometimes, not every time, right? But to be honest. Yeah, I know. But I noted in there, I bring this up because I noted in there that the mayor again made the point that transportation is a high priority, if not the highest priority in the city. Which, caught my eye because here we are in the Transportation Commission, right? And, and so when I listened to your report, Commissioner Leclerc, I think, because we've had conversations of how do we make ourselves relevant? How do we engage? All of that stuff. Because, listening to your report, I'm hearing myself say, yeah, sometimes it feels like we're the last to know or whatever, right? In developments, we only hear about it here if there's a problem after all the houses are built, right? And so I guess my comments is still, how we need to continually be thinking about how do we engage in these issues at the front end, not the, after it's already a problem. because this does continue to seem to be a priority at, with our elected officials and whatnot. And we have the privilege of participating in that discussion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments for Tom? Okay, future meeting topics. You may have noticed that we did not have any minutes to approve from January 3 today. Those will be approved next month in March. Again, I haven't had a rush of ideas about field trips for 22. I'm still waiting for the rush. Think about it. Get a hold of myself or Ms. Carson. Let's see if we can find a reason. I will tell you, if you're still thinking about the electric buses, they are having problems with them. Door issues with the buses themselves, and they have charging issues with the charging equipment. Something about it's a national problem for the company that's doing it. They're working to get it resolved and have
Mr. Chair.
refused delivery on the next 3 buses until they get it resolved. So we can still do that, but it's not going to happen real quick. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Taysom is on Zoom, and I think she had a comment.
Yes, I do have an update. We do have 2 chargers that appear to be fully functioning. So they are going to run the update to the other chargers to see if they get those fully functioning charging on both sides like we would like. And then once that goes through, we should be able to accept the delivery of some of the remaining buses. I believe are 5 buses that are ready to ship as soon as we allow them to ship.
Okay, we hope.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
An idea for a field trip. I think it's been several years since the commission paid a visit to the ACHD Traffic Operations Center in person. It's probably been 4+ years, hasn't it? And I think lots of us on the commission haven't had that tour yet. So I think that could be a good idea.
I have not. I would love to. I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Oh, my goodness, you'll be amazed. Sure. Well, yeah, it's a good one too. The sign shop is fun.
Lancaster?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, along those lines, I have another idea that I would like to verbalize because I won't remember to email you later, most likely. So we've talked about, with Mr. McClure earlier, there's going to be a new highway built in the west side of Meridian, State Highway 16. This is kind of a big deal for this part of the world. We don't see new expressways or freeways built very often. Perhaps it would be an idea to ask for sort of a tour of where the highway is going to be. Just another idea. Anyway.
Well, it's not going down McDermott, at least not down the center of it. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the topic of future meeting topics, I have one I'd like to bring up. One of the other hats I wear is I sit on the ACHD Pedestrian Advisory Group. And one thing that they're going to be doing is soliciting lists from the committee members of enhanced crossing needs. And what I mean by that is, are there locations that we know about where an enhanced crossing such as an RRFB or a pedestrian hybrid beacon are needed but are not currently in the program or on the short-term list. So I'm going to be looking at the community programs list that we put together as a group last year as a starting point. But if there are other locations that you'd like me to take back to the pedestrian advisory group, let me know. They're focused on locations that are not part of a larger roadway project, because those get included most of the time. But if there's an isolated crossing that needs attention, if you can get those to me, and I'll collect them and take them to the group, the PAG.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis read my mind a little bit. I was going to say on the future meeting topics as well. I had intended to add this and I forgot. I apologize. To get some updates from, we have members of our commission that sit on various groups, the CICAC, the Pedestrian Advisory Group. I believe we have somebody on the Bicycle Advisory Group. Maybe not anymore. We did. We have a member of staff that's on it, but to get some updates, whether that's quarterly updates from those groups, that any relevant topics that the Transportation Commission would need to hear or would want to hear. Also, if you sit on any of those groups and you feel that there's a topic that the Transportation Commission needs to hear and it's not during the quarterly update, to just let me know and I can add that as a meeting topic as well. And then the other future meeting topic, not as much a future meeting topic, but just a heads up that March 8th will be the Transportation Commission's annual report to City Council. That will be done during the workshop on the 8th. It will be done the same way as last year. It'll be a formal report written by myself and the chair, signed by the chair, and he will present it to council that evening. It's the day after our March 7th Transportation Commission meeting.
Okay, one other thing that I see here that we need, Mr. Ballard, and has your name by it, downtown street cleanings.
Yes, sir.
We believe, after much research, we believe you're the one that brought that up.
Yes.
Would you remind us a little more about the topic, please?
Well, I sit on the Meridian Chambers Government Affairs Committee. And a question that was asked is focusing on businesses in Meridian. Is there a schedule for the streets to be clean? So I volunteered from that committee to bring it back to this group to see if we could get that information.
Good. Does that need to be a Transportation Commission handled item, or is it a matter of staff providing the information to Mr. Ballard for him to report back?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what I would propose is Miranda has a contact there. And so we'll probably just an email back and maybe with Ballard, or we'll maybe even email everybody. And if you want to have a conversation about it, we could probably add it to the agenda, but I think it's probably just something electronically. Let's start there with the information. And if you need more, we can add it as a meeting topic and invite the powers that be and be part of that conversation. Does that work?
Right. And I didn't know, and I had made this assumption that the streets are under the jurisdiction of ACHD. And my recollection is when I see the street sweepers that has an ACHD logo on the sign or on the cab, if you will. And I didn't know if there was some coordination or, and it was a general question. And that's how that came about.
I guess part of the question could be, is the city involved in that at all? And if not, can the city find out from ACHD, is there a schedule, or is it a matter of when a staff member is available to drive the truck around? I don't know.
Mr. Chair, I will find that out and report back via email to the Transportation Commission.
Okay, thank you.
And
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
just, I mentioned I sit on the Government Affairs Committee chamber, and I'm careful of making this comment, but keep in mind that Government Affairs Committee reviews pending legislation. And we do schedule coffee with legislators. So just as a personal note, if one of you have a question about pending legislation or simply want to be in attendance when those are discussed, I'll get you a seat at the table.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leclerc.
I would be up for that.
Okay?
I'm sorry?
I'd be happy to
Oh, okay.
be invited to come and listen to the Government Affairs Committee.
I don't know what my allotment for recruiting new members are, but I'll just leave it at an open invitation, Mr. Leclerc.
Okay, all right. So I'll just look for a note. But just tonight, we had this comment by the police officers. This minimum reporting requirement is state law. It's $1,500. They says way too low. And so they feel like they're having to do all this extra reporting on accidents, collisions, that is fairly meaningless data. That this might be something that we might, as a city, move through the ACE. Who knows what entities would support or be in favor of this idea.
That's an accident anywhere, whether it's city street or interstate.
They're saying, maybe it should be 2,000, maybe 2,500. So it's state law, yes, but that might be something.
And it doesn't take much to get $1,500.
I know, that's what they're saying. So they're saying it should be higher. So I was gonna follow up on that with them later, but that's a possibility for legislation. Get that all the time.
Okay, anyone with anything else? Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Thank you, all.
Was that aye or by?